Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, internet bots of the world, don't call it a lockdown, because here we are getting ready to get out of lockdown in the second week of Sydney's lockdown, but not. We're going to stay here for another week, and that's all right, because this is a cozy place to be, and the Whisky Roundtable is the coziest of them all. My name is Dr. Fitzsimons. It has been a huge week. I'm echoing to myself. That's interesting.
Kathleen, I think your phone's going wild.
My phone is off.
Okay.
Beautiful, Kathleen. We're going to introduce something. But here in the coziest place of all, Whisky Roundtable, it has been another huge week of whiskey, with lots of things happening, lots of things going on. None of them in Sydney, but that's all right. We have a mixed bag of people tonight. We have Alex Dahlenburg, or do we? We're not sure yet. She's actually by a payphone inserting 5-cent pieces, trying to get some Wi-Fi out of one of those Telstra boxes at the moment. We'll see whether that works or not. Andy Milne is sitting on that Bondi internet, sending COVID through the Wi-Fi 5G rays there to the rest of people. Matt Bailey's sitting in a dungeon. Don't know where he is, but that's all right. His internet's pretty average as well, so this could go either way. And our very special guest, probably long overdue, but it was pointed out to me today that if it's taken so long, I probably should have invited her onto the stream earlier. But one of the fiercest champions of Australian whiskey and spirits in the world, Kathleen Davies. Now, we complain sometimes that our mums are disappointed in us and don't watch this stream enough, but tonight it's okay, because the fairy godmother, the mother of all distilleries and Aussie spirits lovers, is here in the house tonight. So for once I can say my mum is here, and my mum does support me in what I'm doing. Kathleen, how are you? What's in your glass? And welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, everyone. And hello, everyone there. Hello, Dina. Hello, James. I'm double parked tonight. I'm on two special drams. This is for Rye July, and this is the Tim Boone Smoky, because I know that Scotty likes a bit of choo-choo. Choo-choo-choo.
Whiskey tastes better when there's a steam train on the label. That is a pretty big g'day to everyone. As Kathleen said, big, bad, bustling Basamelia. Love to see Kathleen join in. Yes, I know we're overdue. Jimmy Finnegan, g'day to you as well. Friend of the stream. Christina, so excited this cat with Kathleen. Yes, so are we. Whiskey is my jam. Is across all the streams as usual. Lee White, welcome as well. Bailey, you're sitting in a basement. Theoretically, then, your selection of whiskey is probably a little bit restrained from what it normally is. What's in your glass?
I've decided to pick out 2 whiskies for tonight. I think, just like Kathleen, I'm going to double park myself. And because Kathleen is the champion of Australian whiskies and spirits, I am going to double park myself with an over-import cask. I don't have much of a selection here at the moment, so I'm going to go with an over-import cask. This one was bottled like 6-7 years ago, so this is quite an early bottling of port cask. And a Polishing Melons, a 30-year-old from Scotty's favourite distillery, a 30-year-old Linkwood single cask.
Nice.
Yes. What I think you'll find there is that it's too old for a Linkwood. Linkwood should be drunk between the ages of 8 and 15 years. Nice try, but not close enough.
Your loss.
Excellent shirt, Milne. For those listening back without the benefit of visuals, he's wearing a Wild Rover t-shirt. What's in your glass, mate? Jameson, I assume?
I know it should really be Jameson, but no, I've got some rye kicking around behind me for a little bit. But I thought I'd kick off with some of the fun stuff that I got from Hobart. So they're beer cask sampling. So I'm currently on the Smoky Rye Red Ale cask from Hobart.
Excellent. I'm going to throw this out to Alex Dahlenburg. I haven't heard much from her, so I don't know if she's there or not. Alex, are you standing in the street swigging a bottle of Jack Daniels at the moment? I'm going to assume yes. We'll come back to Alex, but just like as Kathleen mentioned,
tap your ear and say, okay, we'll try her again later in the broadcast.
We'll come back to Alex Dahlenburg there. Kathleen, you did mention it's Rye July, and obviously that would celebrate one of the all ryes, let's be honest, but one of the big rye producers, the original rye producer in Australia is Peter Bignell. So I've gone and chosen one of his malt whiskies for Rye July, obviously, the hopped malt whiskey. And I got another one lined up, and we might do a bit of show and tell and whip yours out, whip mine out, see which it is. Because I've got a older Overeem cask as well. I've got OD 251. Where you got?
Oh, OD 46.
Yeah, okay. So you're a little bit earlier than me.
Yeah. About 200 casks earlier there, that one.
They only got good around 246, 247 for me.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I heard that OHD 46 was rubbish. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Big g'day to John Jarvis from Hobart Distillery down there. Alex she's here in the comments. She's back and to Crafty Field, locked down in his caravan in Kapiti. Now, Kathleen, a few people would have heard your name. They would have seen you at every whiskey and spirits function in Australia in the past 10 years, pretty much. You are the founder and owner of Nip of Courage. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what Nip of Courage is and why you are the fiercest supporter of Australian spirits?
Thanks, Scotty. I started the business back in 2013. I saw a really big opportunity to promote Australian craft spirits because no one was really doing it at the time from a distributor and marketing perspective. Obviously, there were around the time I think when I started investigating around 2012, there were probably about 30 or 40 craft distilleries that I knew of. I went and approached all these different distilleries and with a business plan and said, this is what I want to do. I want to promote your spirits and distribute them all over the country and make people aware of them. And so I did that. I had a group of distilleries that I started out with and had a little milk crate, and actually I was just me at the time and just went and knocked on every single door in Sydney. And I think over the period of 2 months, I didn't get a single sale. People would just say, I've never heard of these brands, basically bugger off. And then there was this big trade show on in Melbourne called Top Shelf. It was the first year that they held it. And I just put everything into the van and drove down to Melbourne and set up a little bar with just Australian craft, put up some tacky Australia flags. And then, yeah, boom. There was, I think, nearly 200 customers signed up at the show. We were like one of the busiest stands. And I was literally driving to Victoria every second week and sleeping on a mate's lounge and just selling out of the back of my van to get the business going. Sydney took about 2 years to take off, and then we ended up just going boom all over the rest of the country and getting the products out everywhere. But yeah, it's been a long journey, but really fulfilling. I've really enjoyed getting to know all the different distilleries, even the ones we don't represent. It's just been a really lovely experience. And I just feel like the industry is just emerging in terms of, more mainstream people sort of knowing about all of these awesome distilleries everywhere.
Kathleen, before Nip of Courage, what was your sort of entry point into that? That wasn't your first foray into the sort of booze scene. I think Alex, who's supposed to be here, said, how did you start out in the industry? I think that's a really good question. Where was your first steps into spirits?
Yeah,
I know you're telling me a story about Penfolds and wine and weird tastings, but I mean, it might go before that.
Yeah, so I was actually a bartender.
Yeah, that was actually the wine chat filter.
I was a bartender when I turned 18 and worked in hospitality for about 7 years, and I also studied at university during that time. Actually failed high school and but got accepted into university for fine arts and studied at COFA. Actually, Dave Withers studied at COFA as well and did fine arts from the head distiller of Archie Rose. But yeah, so I studied there, and I just really enjoyed working with people. I love the liquor industry. First spirit I ever had neat was when I was 18, and it was because normally back in the day you'd mix it with everything, but the first spirit I had neat was actually Bundy OP rum when I travelled up to Longreach to visit some family and chipped a big chunk of ice off into my glass, and my dad's cousin and I just went around playing cards at people's houses. It was stinking hot. We just tipped the OP rum over the ice, and that was sort of my first straight spirits experience as an adult. And worked in hospitality. I also worked for blue chip companies in sales. Worked for Carlton and United Breweries, worked for Coca-Cola Amatil in the licensed division, like alcohol area. Worked for Lion Nathan at the time, the brewer, in marketing. I worked in export for about 8 years as well, in booze, everything from wine to beer to spirits at one point. Worked on different brand launches when I was at Lion, and also different spirit launches when I was at CUB as well, when they were selling beer, wine and spirits. Yeah.
Very cool.
Quick shout out. It was something that I actually thought of, and I didn't know which way you're going to go down this story, but Ryan comments, butter plus chips usually ends in teeth, not ice. And I thought this was going to be a glorious 18-year-old story in Longreach, because a beautiful part of the world, it can get pretty crazy up there. And to Mick from the Imbue Distillery, you're all awesome peps. I can only assume that because I think it's YOU apostrophe RE on that one, Mick. But there we go. And to Kirsten as well is true. How lovely, folks. Now, Kathleen, like leading on from where you start, obviously you were talking about Top Shelf and kicking off Nip of Courage. There's been some ballsy moves in whiskey and spirits over the years, but Nip of Courage has to be up there with one of the ballsiest to go, only Australian. You're probably better positioned than most people to see the changes. We get a lot of people watching this stream. We've obviously got distillers. We've got some people who are in the industry in other parts, and I can see some people just fans there. It's someone like you, because you're not necessarily front and center of every drink they have. You're not at the bar serving it, but you've helped shape it in so many different ways. What have been the big changes in the past decade or so, specifically around Aussie whiskey and wider spirits?
Yeah, look, I think it's been really important for some of the bigger players, or that have got a bit of scale, to move up and sort of break into mainstream a little bit more. Bigger players like obviously Starwood, Archie Rosen, and also Cam over at Lime Burners, who's now got some scale as well. I think because when you're talking to industry, everyone says that the industry is flooded. It's, there's too much gin, there's too much whiskey. In actual fact, our market share is still pretty low compared to the global players. And I just think there's still a lot more opportunity. It's just about the industry working in other channels and areas to move product. The other thing is, if I just stepped out and went out into the burbs and just stopped random people in the street and said, how many distilleries are there in Australia? They might say maybe 20. And if you ask them to name some of them, of the ones that they know, they might rattle off half a dozen. But a lot of people wouldn't even believe that there's over 300 now. And I believe that we haven't even scratched the surface, that there is still so much more opportunity in terms of market share and growth for the industry. It's just a matter of some of these bigger players, like in the gin scene, like Four Pillars, and even Ink Gin from northern New South Wales, from Husk Distillery, has made some really, really great traction in terms of awareness in the industry. And I think if we can get some bigger players like that, like the Starwoods that Andy's working with, and Archie Rose, I think it could be really, really exciting for everyone else in the future.
And do you think that's price driven? I mean, I geek out and spend a lot of time looking at market data and categories and size of categories and share of category, and a simple example is we moved Buffalo Trace from super premium to premium in terms of pricing brackets, and that had a huge impact on volume opportunities as a result. Then, do you think that it's, are we trying to convince consumers to move up to super premium or premium in terms of gin, and spend more dollars locally, or are you thinking that the industry will move to a sort of more mainstream premium pricing so that we become more of that affordable bracket along with the rest of the world?
I think if you look at something like Twofolds, for example, from Starwood, that's definitely a really great entry point for people that want to try Australian whiskey, and we need that. It all comes down to scale as well. I think if there was larger scale with producers in Australia, then price points would be more competitive. But to look at the scale, I think there's another really exciting opportunity in terms of whiskey in Australia as well that needs to be developed more, and that's the guys that sort of sit in the medium sort of scale, distilleries like Corowa Distillery that, have got a decent amount of volume, that are still building their brand and awareness, that sort of thing. There's all these little dark horses sitting out there that have got some decent volumes coming through, but it's just, I guess the bigger players are sort of breaking through those gates first to create and spark interest for, mainstream drinkers, I guess.
And have you seen a strong benefit from that as, four pillars of, broken down many barriers in terms of global reach and so forth, and Starwood and Mr. Black similarly? Like, does that have a really good knock-on effect?
Oh, definitely. As a person who's selling, as soon as if you walk into a bar and see a bottle of Four Pillars or a bottle of Starwood sitting in the bar, straight away you've got half a chance of selling a bottle to the bar or half a chance of selling a bottle to the bottle shop. So it's nice. In the years ago, when I'd walk into a bottle shop, the first thing I would look for was craft beer. And if I saw a really good range of, canned craft beer that was a little bit kind of funky, I thought, well, at least they're sort of looking at, Australian beer. Maybe they'll look at Australian spirits. So, yeah. But now if there's a bottle of, the sort of bigger players in there, you've got half a chance.
Yeah.
Kathleen, what do you see is you've mentioned some of the big players and how that kind of proliferates and grows the size of the pie rather than just the slice, and how that will sort of it grows everything, and therefore mid-sized players, as you say. What do you see in the opportunities for when we see there's been I would say there's been a seismic shift in how we're seeing even that side of things grow in Australia in the last 12 months with the likes of Morris Brothers, with the likes of wineries getting in the game, and even other whiskey spirits actually getting a bit of attention now. Things like rye whiskey, gospel, blah blah blah, things like that, which has a. Do you see that as still a growing slice of it as well? Is that sort of in terms of these big players, in terms of Morris and things like that, changing the scene again?
Yeah, I do. I think it's really, really important. And I think even with gospel, they've had a really good, they've really caught the attention of young people and young drinkers. When I say young, 20s, 30s. But I think that they've broken...
Always.
Over 18. But they've broken some really good ground, and I feel that's really helped the rye category, for example,
which is growing the sort of the American drinker category.
Yes.
Bourbon is massive in Australia. Whether it's the single biggest export market for bourbon is Australia.
Yeah,
so that's going to tap into that sort of realm of drinkers who may have already spent maybe $39 on a bottle of Jack. Jim Beam, and then 48 on a bottle of Jack or something, and then up from there.
Yeah, and an interesting thing when we look at American whiskey, back when I worked in marketing at Lion, we were launching an American bourbon in Australia, and they did all of the tests, the focus testing, with the different groups in Perth, because it was actually an area where consumers drank more high-end bourbon than anywhere else in Australia at over-index. So, there's
it
always...
was the RTD capital of Australia as well.
Is it?
It was for a very long time. It was the RTD capital because of the mining boom and miners drinking RTDs.
I thought Ringrose Park at Wentworthville was the RTD capital.
I think it's regional Melbourne, regional Vic.
Yeah, regional Vic.
But not super regional, just the burbs.
Yeah.
I want to do a shout out to a few people, because we have people all around the world, which is the great about this thing at time slot. To the big daddy of the stream, Mark Westmoreland from the Wolfburn Distillery. It's great that the big names are opening doors and the small ones can sneak in and get liquid into the lips. 100%, like that works in Scotland and helps Wolfburn. It's over here. Brett Steele in Tassie says evening, doing a lot of good stuff in Tassie Whisky Week coming up very, very shortly as well. Now, I want to pick up on something that you've sort of touched on a little bit, that we sit in a bubble. We sit in a bubble of spirits. We think everyone knows everything about spirits. But Kathleen, you mentioned it, and Milne, you sort of touched on it as well. There's a lot of people out there that don't, drink spirits for a living, and, they may only come past, and their first experience or knowledge might be at a bar somewhere. They say, oh, we make it in Australia, do we? So as the, being at the forefront, Kathleen, and people who know me know that I love a bit of role play. My girlfriend is still wondering why I keep buying her train whistles and conductor's hats and that sort of thing. She hasn't quite figured that out yet. But we have, fresh off the boat, Andy Milne here, who has no experience with Australian whiskey and spirits whatsoever. You've door-stopped him on Bondi Beach. He's got a margarita in a mug going. And Kathleen, you've come up to him and said, Milne, did you know that we make whiskey in Australia? And he goes, the next question is, so Milne's going to ask you a question now. His first reaction is never hearing about Australian whiskey, and then Kathleen, you're going to sell Australian whiskey to him based on what he says. So you've stopped him. And so Kathleen, if you could just tell Milne, g'day Milne, do you know we make Australian whiskey in this? We make whiskey in Australia.
G'day Milne, did you know that we sell Australian whiskey in Australia?
You do? Is it any good?
Bloody oath.
This segment hasn't been fully fleshed out, but I think it's working. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens then? So Milne, someone just gone, yeah, bloody oath we do, and then what's your response to that? Like let's try and sell Australian whiskey to Milne.
Okay. So what type of whiskey do you normally drink, Andy?
I probably should have prompted everyone that I was going to do this before I did it, but
it feels very much like what's the Apprentice is all of a sudden we're on the show now. It's like, give me a pitch.
Wow.
I like to drink Jack Daniels.
Jack Daniels, okay. I know a girl that really likes Jack Daniels.
I'm married, but thank you very much.
Okay. Ned. Oh, yes. Have you heard of Ned's whiskey?
I've not.
Yeah.
You
Tell me
should
more.
try that. Okay. It's from Victoria. It's from Victoria. And it's great. Scotty, I'm not into role plays. This is just...
And that's all we need. We'll just take that soundbite, and that's going to form the new intros. That's for sure. But it's
Alex. Alex is on the chat here. I'm here. Oh my God, good guys. Look, see, we need Alex. Where are you, Alex?
But I suppose to elaborate on that, when you first started, trying to promote and trying to sell, Aussie spirits, what was your what was the feedback from your customers, and what were your biggest challenges, I suppose? What were your sort of kickbacks from retailers and bars?
Look, back in like 2013 sort of days, if people hadn't heard, especially in Sydney, if people hadn't heard of those brands, they just wouldn't touch them. And I think my view is back then, a lot of the head offices for all the big spirit companies are based in Sydney and, you know, had a very good sort of stamp on the market in Sydney. Melbourne's always been, I guess, a little bit quirkier in terms of, you know, having things a little bit different on their back bar and back in the day. And so the bartenders down there, instead of saying bugger off, would say, get your ass in here, let me have a look at it. I've never heard of it before. And then they would want to try it and then they would buy it, kind of thing, if they enjoyed it, sort of thing. Whereas Sydney was always very kind of standoffish unless they knew it. It's obviously a very different story now, but in the early days, two very different cities, very different markets for new products back then. Yeah.
Just on that point, Kathleen, do you see something I see a fair bit of, and I don't know how accurate this is, that there's a very much state by state kind of like relationship with distilleries and brands, as in like,
yes.
like Archie Rose, for instance, will sell well in New South Wales, and Starward will sell well in Victoria, and like, and there's other cases like Melbourne Gin Co will sell well in Melbourne, but won't sell well in Sydney, and vice versa. Whatever, you know, Poor Tom's or something will sell well in Sydney, but won't sell well in Melbourne, kind of thing. Do you see that kind of like state by state kind of like limitations where people in, say, South Australia love to drink South Australian gins and whiskies and whatnot, or is it? Do you see that sort of dissipating or growing, that sort of side of things?
I think eventually, it will fade away. In the beginning, I remember with Peter, with Belgrove, when we first started with him, there was barely any venues in Tasmania that stocked Belgrove, and now sort of you can't walk into a bar without seeing it. Back then, and I remember we looked after back in the beginning as well, Mount Uncle Distillery, walked around Cairns, there wasn't any Mount Uncle products, and I just sort of thought, this is crazy, like the local area should be getting behind the local distilleries, and that finally happened. But yeah, I think going forward, there is kind of a little bit of a state cluster at the moment of different brands.
So it'll probably change. It will change, and we'll see that.
Yeah, I think it will change in the future.
There's a great question from Alex who wants to ask, what are actually some of the brands that you work with? You mentioned Belgrove, and you've mentioned Imbue and a few others. What are some of the and here we go. So tell us a few that you work with that have really changed.
Yeah, look, I mean, one of the longest brands I've worked with is Belgrove. It's been, I think, out of all the distilleries in Australia, it has, I guess, one of the most amazing stories. And Peter is just such a character in the industry, and you know, he's really well known for innovation. So as a smaller player, I think Peter, you know, is a fantastic person to work with, and his brand is just amazing. And his brand resonates. It's like a people's choice. It's, you know, when people hear the story, they fall in love with Belgrove. So it's all about storytelling and Peter's passion for no waste and his sustainability and approach to farming as well. And Alex is saying, tell us your favourite Hollywood Bignell story. Well, there are actually many Peter Bignell stories. But
let's hold that thought. We're going to get into that. Hold that thought.
Okay. But and look, Tim Boone is one that I really enjoy working with as well from a whiskey point of view. I just think that, you know, their approach to community is really strong as well. And Josh has now opened a cooperage as well to do his own coopering, and his father-in-law is running that side of the business. You know, it's a beautiful team down there, beautiful distillery. Josh is really pushing the limits with, you know, the way he distills, and he's still carrying on some of the tradition from the past distiller, Tim, as well. And it's just, I really enjoy working with both those whiskey brands. They're fantastic. Obviously, with our new wholesaler service that's coming on, we'll be working with a lot more as well, which is very exciting. Over 108 brands.
before we actually talk about the wholesale, because I want to talk about that, and it may not be obvious for maybe consumers, but I think it's going to be very important that they're going to feel the effects without necessarily seeing what happens. You're not probably have to talk about this, but I'm going to dob you in a little bit. You mentioned a few brands there, but you didn't mention brands that you've worked with in the past that you've sort of helped from their early days. So brands like McHenry and Blackgate and Coral and Kangaroo and Spirits, who are obviously not known as much for maybe up until in the future and these sort of things. So you've worked with a bunch of brands, and you mentioned the word in a sentence earlier about certain businesses wouldn't touch Australian brands because they didn't know them, wouldn't touch. And one of the great things about the Australian spirits industry is we can, COVID safely, go and touch them. We can go and visit them. We can go and have those experiences. It's no longer you need to get on a plane to go anywhere. Pretty much in every major city in Australia, you can drive to a distillery now. So they seem a long time away, and I've admitted a couple of times that I was the dickhead that got up at the Aussie Spirits auction and said, "Thank God the fires are over. Now I can get back to business." And next day, COVID hit and the world collapsed. But we forget that pre-pandemic, a lot of our regional distilleries were really hit by the fires. If they weren't burnt to the ground or picking up distilleries that weren't meant to be picked up and moved, they had no tourism trade. So, I know, Kathleen, you
and the floods.
The drought, yeah. I forgot about the drought and the floods. Yeah, they've had it really easy, these blokes, haven't they? So, I think it's a good time. We might get around the round table, and I highly encourage the audience to jump in here as well. But some of the greatest memories and stories from visiting distilleries in your time. This is where I'm leading to with as many Hollywood Bignell stories as possible. So, Kathleen, do you want to kick us off with some stories about being on the ground at some of these distilleries, some memories that you have?
Yeah, sure. I think. Oh, okay. Do you want a Hollywood Bignell one first?
Well, we do have to wrap up by next Friday because we expect to be able to lock down by then. So if you could just keep it to a good sort of 11 days of content, that'd be great.
Okay. I think one of my favourite stories with Peter was actually when I worked with him at Taste Tasmania, and we were packing down his stand, and there was a bakery next door to us throwing all this bread in the dumpster. And he said, "Oh, Kathleen, quick, just jump in the dumpster and get that bread out and put it in my trailer." And I went, okay. So I jumped in and threw it all in the trailer. I said, "What are you doing with all of this?" It was just piled over his trailer. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to distill it." And I just went, okay. So I think later that week or whatever, he worked out a way to distill this bread, and he turned it into 12 bottles of vodka and called it Crouton vodka. But, his big thing is he doesn't like waste. Those sort of stories with Peter are amazing. Another time I was riding around in his four-wheel drive with him on the property, and he put his windscreen wipers on, and the windscreen fluid came up to clean his windscreen. I went, "What's that smell?" And he said, "Oh, that's the tails off the distilling run." And I went, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, I don't." Oh, I'm just thinking to myself, God, I'd hate to see what happens to the Duco of his car. But anyway, he said it's really good in winter. It actually burns the ice off my windscreen. And I was like, cool.
or if the cops pull him over and the car is reeking of 95% neutral alcohol.
Exactly.
You just reminded me when I remember once back in Peter's shed, we were walking from the start down to the end of where the casks were sitting, and there were like these 5 or 6 milk crates with Belgrove bottles sitting in them, sealed up, but they hadn't got any labels yet. And the liquid inside each bottle was fluorescent yellow. And I mean properly fluorescent yellow, like spirit in these bottles.
Peter Colada.
Well, I said to Peter, I said, "What the hell is that? Like, what are you even doing here?" And he said, "Oh, it's I've distilled pineapples." Not pineapple juice, he distilled pineapples. And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Oh, I hate waste. So a friend of my brother's was throwing out some pineapple pulp, and I took it all and distilled it." And I don't know if he ever actually put a label on it or did anything with it. I don't know what ended up happening to it because I never saw it anywhere. But it was like, I love that approach to reusing and, of course, his spit bucket story of him,
But we have before you continue that, we do have Peter Bignell Hollywood in the chat. So Peter, what happened to the spilled pineapples? We want to know. Continue, Bailey. Sorry.
Oh,
no,
the
the Kathleen one. I think you know this one better than me, but it was just the spit buckets from the wine.
Yes, from Rootstock, Mike Benny's wine festival.
Yeah,
it was all sustainable, and
Spittoons.
Peter ended up saying, why is everyone spitting in these buckets? Are we throwing that out? And he ended up collecting it all and taking it down to Poor Tom's, and the Poor Tom's guys, Jess and Griff, got there with Peter and distilled it into what turned into a clear spirit, essentially like a new make brandy. And we tasted it straight off the still, and it was really interesting. They put it in bottles and called it Kissing a Stranger. They did put some of it in a cask for a period of time and released it at next year's show. I've actually got a bottle, but I won't get up and get it right now. But
I've got one in a box down here, but I can't find it right now.
Yeah. The other thing that's really funny about Peter's is, when you go to the actual distillery in Tasmania, you'll drive down this beautiful tree. That's it, Kissing a Stranger. Drive down this beautiful tree-lined estate. There's the rye fields on one side and, paddocks on the other. It's really beautiful. And then there's this beautiful house at the end of it. And I was thinking when the first time I went there years ago, oh, this is amazing. And then drove beyond the house and it was just like the Armageddon. There is trash everywhere, all these different tractors and swing sets and bloody bottles on trees with fruit growing through them and all these different things. I said to Peter, what do you need this swing set for? And he just said, I don't know, I might need the piping off it one day to build something. And it's absolutely amazing. The distillery's made everything himself, and when all the different festivals are on, he makes all these cool little machines and things out of all the bits and pieces. And I remember when I was there taking photos, Peter said to me, oh, Sally, my wife, said, just try not to get any junk in the background. I was like tripping over the junk trying to take photos of him. I was just like, okay, Peter. But yeah, definitely. And everyone that goes there says it's the most amazing distillery experience they've ever had. Like, Peter is just amazing at explaining things in layman's terms to people as well. It's a tourist attraction of Tasmania. If you go to Tasmania, you have to go to Belgrove. It's fantastic.
Yeah, thoroughly agree.
And this is descended into not your favourite Peter Bignell story rather than Australian Distiller's story. One thing I will say about is call ahead. It probably hasn't happened recently, but what used to happen when Peter was telling me that various groups of Europeans, Germans and Swedish, and when they talk about whiskey, they get pretty intense about their whiskey, and they would just rock up at his distillery, which is also his house, and just be like, we want the grand tour. So call ahead when you get down there.
Yeah, definitely
Milne,
ahead.
Milne, your favourite Australian distillery visit experience?
And we're not doing a role play.
I'm talking Milne because we have a development. We don't know what's happening with the pineapples yet, but the swing set is now a gantry for lifting barrels. So there you go, Kathleen. That's what it became.
There's two, and it was in the same day. And for the reasons I'm going to tell you, I'm not allowed to say the names of the distilleries because if their bosses listen to this, they might get in a bit of trouble. But I think it's the freedom.
Let's
the freedom
on air. Nothing libelous.
But the freedom of luxury in there was the first distillery we went to that day was we're at beautiful scenery, beautiful views from the distillery, and then do the tour, and at the end he's like, here's the bond store, crack on. It's just like, if the bung's a bit loose, crack into it and off you go. And just that attitude, just go and try things. We're not siphoning bucket loads out, we're just siphoning a dram between us all and trying. And that great freedom that, the amount of distilleries I've been to in Scotland, through standard tours and through, private contacts and so forth, and through work, where, you're getting the Rolls Royce in terms of Scotland, but at the same time, they're just like, everything's like, but you can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do this. And the only thing they allow you to do is go, well, you can take pictures of the still room because, don't worry, this bullshit about creating a fire is bullshit. So there was that. And then later on that night, having consumed quite a large amount of whiskey, I was given the freedom to go climb the racking of a distillery. And it was just scaffolding, basically racking.
You are an OH&S nightmare, aren't you? This is just a lawsuit waiting to happen right there.
Do not mention. Do not mention this. Yes, Alex, we'll guess it. I'm going to say it live, though.
That's the location. Not it's fine. But yeah, no, the complete freedom to wander up and sort of climbing around with
Jared,
a spirit thief in one hand and a glass in the other. And
I can't get my hearing to work.
Who cares?
I think we've got some technical difficulties on Kathleen's end.
Yeah.
That's right, Kathleen.
We can hear her.
That's right. We can still hear you. So that's all right.
I know I mentioned the pineapple thing before, but Milne, just off the piggybacking off you, that first story of yours of just wandering through a warehouse and popping the bungs off things was something that I got to recently do just pre-lockout, second lockdown, and it was pretty special indeed. Yeah, it was a distillery.
It's bizarre because I've been in. I took a distiller out for dinner once on Isla, and we finished the dinner, and he said, "Oh, do you want to come back for a dram?" And said, "The selection in this bar is pretty crap, so let's go back to the distillery." And we walk into the warehouse, and you think, "Oh, geez, we're going to go wild here." And it was, the casks available and the presentations that were available, and that was all we could actually have. And like you're the distillery manager, you got freedom of all these casks, and still, sensibly, and they're owned by a big distiller, so a big company even. So you've got to be careful, but there's sort of no freedom in that sense to go, look, this is my background, this is my backyard, even as you please. But
Milne, like you're touching on something there which I love, and I'm going to drill back to this point of that word touch, and again, COVID safe, touch what you're allowed to touch, but you can go and touch these places and go and see them. In Scotland, you need to be you need to run England's biggest whiskey festival to get that VIP treatment. In Australia, you don't need to be anyone. You can go to your local distillery and sort of have that bit of a chat, and more than likely they'll say, look, this is not ready, this is XYZ, it's going to be whiskey in a couple of years, or it's going to be ready in a couple of years, but come and try it, come and see what we're doing. And I love that, and that's why it's so great, and why you can go and get back to the regional areas. And so for anyone who hasn't been to a distillery in Australia, you've been putting it off and that sort of stuff, and of course if you're in Sydney, don't do it this weekend, but like people in Melbourne are now pretty free to roam around, and people in other parts of the world, country rather, it is one of the great experiences, and try and figure out a way to that if you're with a partner or a family or with mates, find out a way to not drive there, because they tend to be unbelievable experiences. Just like Crafty Field here is, favorite party trick is fingered off the parrot while it's still running. People love it. Yeah, and I love that sort of element. You get so up close and personal to these distilleries, which is quite remarkable. To Matt Cotter saying there that in 2015 Belgrove started him on his journey, and I want to do a quick shout out, bit off topic, to Dom Roscoe, last week's guest, to his internet's not particularly well, but that's all right. No one's internet is particularly well tonight, mate. So you're totally fine there. Bailey, did you want to have another stab at your favourite trip or something like that?
I mean, there's so many in Australia that I've had the opportunity to be a part of. I mean, I've hosted events. One of my favorites was I hosted an event with Robbie and Emma Gilligan when they were both at Old Kempton. That was fantastic. That was a dinner with a bunch from Tasmania joining in and doing a whiskey paired dinner in the Old Kempton houses there. That was a lot of fun. But there's so many, like when you meet people and you have these experiences and you explore things. Like I know he's a darling of the stream, and I'm going to mention John Jarvis again because I've had the opportunity to rummage through Devil's Distillery or Hobart Whiskey just a number of times, which has been fantastic. It's that's part of it's. I think Andy sort of touched on that before about how you don't really what's the word for it? As in, you go through a distillery in a much more established distilling community, like Scotland, like America, those kind of places, and it's very sanitized. Even the sort of behind the scenes tour, if you like, and even Andy, some places still don't allow photographs of the still room. It's like in case it's like whatever. Yeah, my iPhone's got spark and we're all going to die. But I mean, it's but it's still like
there was one Australian distillery that told me that as well. Yeah,
exactly. I have heard it here.
But I think it's also, I think, the community vibe. So like my first ever distillery in Australia was Starward, and it was before I lived here and before I moved here, and I can't remember how it was I managed to get a connection, but I managed to sort of find the link in through David. I think we went through Whisky Exchange, but I dropped him a line and said, I'll fly across to Melbourne for a couple of days and come and see you. And did the distillery tour, tasted the whole range of the distillery. I remember saying to my friend, I was like, we'll be here for an hour and a half tops. It's like, he's only got 2 whiskeys, it won't be that long. So we'll just run around, taste a bit, do the tour, and then off we go. 4 hours later, we're dragged out and rushing off to dinner because we tasted through his entire experimental range. And when we finished that, he then said, here's everything that everyone else is doing in Australia. And it was just, went through all the other Australian whiskies that he had in his cupboard, all the other rums that he had from Australia. And it's just, he wasn't just selling Starward. He was, he was truly going that you don't understand Australian whiskey. Let me tell you everything I can, and don't just leave thinking I'm the only one.
The cream on top of the cake was, of course, he finished with a Speyburn. Kathleen, can you hear us again? Are we back online? Are we? Oh no, we can't hear you. You can hear us though. It seems okay. Click the little cog icon at the bottom of your screen. You should be able to just adjust your mic settings within the browser, unless it's a Windows issue or something. I don't know.
So I'm a little bit lucky as well in the fact while we get Kathleen back on, because we've still got a few questions. And the best thing about lockdown is I have nowhere to be, so we can go a little bit longer. We haven't even got onto Proust yet, so we will get there. No, I haven't. I unmuted you, so you can still go. You should be able to. You're actually on maximum volume, Kathleen. If we can figure this one out.
And one of my favorite Australian experiences ever was at Starward as well. I'll just say that. I'm just winding you up, but it was true though. It's like it really was like it's the tiki bar at Old Essendon site with Dave Vitale pulling out cask samples was a fun day. Kathleen, have we got you? We might have to.
She can hear us. Kathleen, as Matt said, there's on the cog setting underneath what we see in the back end here, your audio input, so your audio output. Make sure that's at the right setting, because you're probably trying to get audio output from something that's incorrect. But to fill the gap as a bit of a filibuster, whatever. I've been very lucky to have some unbelievable experiences at Australian distilleries. I remember seeing, for me, one of the great distillery trips was, as Kathleen mentioned, one of the legends of Australian whiskey, Cam Syme, lime burners down in Albany, and to go and drink whiskey at the and then seeing sites maybe with a hip flask of something behind there to go and do it. But arguably one of the biggest nights, and it goes down in New South Wales whiskey history, is I was talking to a friend of the stream and previous guest, Reggie Paps, who's now at the Manly Distillery, talking about his first visit to the Blackgate distillery. And I'm not going to, dob him in about what happened that night, but there was a few things that happened. And I said, I reckon that sounds like a bit of fun, but I reckon I can do better. And I reckon that first night out of Blackgate, where Kathleen was there for Elton John tribute bands, the Blackgate Olympics, I think, happened that week as well. And that was a pretty wild night.
Just need some more line dancing, didn't it, Scotty?
Yeah. Kathleen, I've just muted you and unmuted.
Can you hear me
Hey,
now?
hello?
Yes,
Hey!
we can hear you. There
Thanks
you
for
are.
unmuting me, Scotty.
No, you were unmuted, but as Bailey perfectly suggested, maybe I muted you again and then unmuted you, and that
Maybe
should
I need
untrigger it. So we've just filled a 10 minutes of gap for you. So
I think that pretty much leads us straight into Prowse at this point.
Everyone. Thanks for having me on. Bye.
Yeah, well, we're in the last few minutes, so we should probably head into Prowse at this point.
No, before I want to say something or ask something very quickly before we get into Prowse, is that Nipper Courage has focused on building brands and working with select brands. And there was a question that came up here, and I don't know if you're still here, but we're going to go. I'm just going to scroll through to. I wrote the name down and then I've lost it. So it was a Tasmanian distiller or potentially a distiller to be asking, what is the process? So Kent Moore, it's just like, as a small distillery, Tasmania, just hitting the market, get started with the distributor. Now that's a really interesting question, but what I will say is Kathleen and the team from Nipper Courage, who's got a great team around the country, will always pick up the phone, whether you work together or not, and talk you through it. And none more is that personified by the fact that Nipper Courage is just about to launch a sale for Australian spirits, and not just brands they work with and develop, but with anything that's Australian. And I've been lucky enough to see a bit of a sneak preview, and it's going to be a game changer. It's as big as any wholesaler in Australia in terms of its offering and its scope. But do you want to talk very quickly, Kathleen, about the wholesale arm of Nipper Courage? And because I know Ryan, who's been in the chat here, is a bottle store as well. Like, it's going to be a game changer for people like us.
Yeah. So we got a federal government grant to basically, for a project that runs over 2 years, which will go beyond 2 years, obviously, but to try and help the industry grow market share. And during COVID, obviously, there were a lot of changes that happened in our business. Our business was about 80% focused on, or our revenue was based on about 80% of on-premise, which is your bars and restaurants and that sort of thing. And with COVID hitting last year, all of that basically fell over. And always had always had the idea that I would love to do a wholesaler service, because we're always set up for that. Because initially when we started our business back in 2013, we reached out to all the wholesalers. Normally what distributors do is they go out on the road and sell and do the marketing, and they normally have all the stock stored with wholesalers, but not one wholesaler returned my phone call or email, so we were forced to set up our own warehousing. So we're a little bit different to other distributors at that time. So we're basically set up for wholesaling, and we just thought, well, through COVID, so many smaller guys were getting turned away by the bigger wholesalers, and I just thought there's got to be a way for us to help everyone. So I came up with the idea of doing this, and basically wholesaling for just Australian craft spirits, which is it's a very niche thing to do. But we've signed up over 100 distilleries, and we've got about 2,000 cases arriving in our warehouse over the next couple of weeks, which is very scary. But we've signed up all of the top distributors in Australia as well, which is exciting. Sorry, is that my internet that's freezing? But we've signed up all the top distributors across the country as well, which is super exciting. And we're also offering marketing packages and help for all the smaller distilleries that need help with promotion. And we're running seminars as well to help the smaller guys get to the next level with their businesses as well, because we would like to try and make Australian distilleries more attractive to other distributors out there as well.
Very cool.
Jared.
Well, I don't know what's happened to Scotty. We've lost Scotty, it seems. We've lost our main man, our host. So I think Andy's still there. Andy, you're still good? Yep, okay. Andy's good. I can't even adjust the ratio of the screen at the moment because I'm not the host. So we're going to have to go with this vertical column that we've all got at the moment. And your phone is ringing as well.
Jared! It's bloody Jared.
Jared! Okay. By the way, hi, Jared. Sorry, it's good to see you.
Saying hi, Jared.
Hello. Okay, cool. So
let's kick off into Proust to end it then. Okay. I'll kick us off. What do you appreciate most in a whiskey?
Oh, that was gonna be mine.
What do I appreciate most in whiskey? Flavour, balance. I also like a good sort of high ABV because this old palate is a bit worn out and I like a bit of flavour on it. So anything above 50, it's for me.
Sorry, let's really apologise to the Speyburn fans out there. She said anything over 50% ABV, we love you, but it's just not going to work. Well, since you stole my question, Andy, you prick. I was going to ask because you focus a lot on wholesaling. What is my question for you then? Is what's your favorite virtue of a whiskey bar?
Definitely the favorite virtue. Well, a good whiskey range is good, but I think the most important thing in a whiskey bar is the team behind the bar because they make you feel welcome. Their knowledge of the spirits that are sitting on the bar. Their passion for the juice as well.
Yeah.
That's always what makes a whiskey bar experience amazing.
Awesome. I'm going to ask Alex's on behalf of hers because her predicament with her internet. Who is the whiskey love of your life? Now, it could be a person, a thing, it could be a place. What is the whiskey love of your life? Probably a person, but that's changed everything for you. Your whiskey love.
Definitely Bill Lark.
Bill Lark?
Yeah. He's what he's done for the industry and all of the barriers that he's broken. He is. I have so many whiskey crushes, but yeah, he's up here. He's helped so many people along the way and very generous with his time. And he gets to meet so many people, but he makes everyone he meets feel so special. So yeah, I think what he's done and the barriers he's broken down is amazing for the industry.
And I'm going to ask Scotty's question on behalf of Scotty, even though I don't know his question, but I'm going to ask his because I don't know where he is and I don't know if he's coming back. But we'll finish with asking if you could work at any distillery in the world, where would it be and why? Now, it's where you take on a full-time role at a distillery anywhere in the world. The whole process, start to bottom, like you are the head distiller at this distillery. Where do you work and why?
Okay, firstly, I never would want to be a distiller.
No, neither would I, neither would Scotty, and neither would many of us in here. But it's if you could take a job at any distillery, where would it be?
Okay. I reckon Archie Rose, as long as Will answered to me.
Yes. Wow. Dropping bombshell right on the 1 hour mark. I love it. That's just great.
If it was for community spirit, I would choose Tim Boone. If it was for scenery, I've seen Ashley is on there, said, what's the most visually stunning distillery in Australia? The most visually stunning distillery in Australia, in my view, is Corowa Distilling Co.
It's a very beautiful site, yeah.
Amazing. If you ever get a chance to go there, go and have a look at it and visit. It's bloody beautiful. The restoration that they've done on that flour mill and the detail is amazing. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Andy, with your permission, we're going to leave it here. We've hit just over the hour mark. I want to thank you so much, Kathleen, from Nip of Courage, coming on. Kathleen Davies from Nip of Courage, an absolute trailblazing pioneer of promoting Australian spirits. And I'm not going to do my sign off is not going to be nearly as animated as Scotty's normally. But I really appreciate you coming on and being a part of Whisky Roundtable. As much as this was a roller coaster of technical nightmares for all of us. Except Andy. God damn it, Andy's the
one thing I've got. Here's an example of an etched glass, right?
Yep.
Finish on this. Now these companies go to a lot of trouble to get their logos put on the glass.
Sure.
So I think the best way for you to see the logo is to actually fill the glass all the way to the top.
Yes.
And then you can see what it is.
Yeah, well, so what you're saying is drink responsibly, but fill your Glencairn to the top.
Yeah. So you can see the logo.
I feel like there's some incongruencies in that statement, but
when you take photos,
I like the continuous top up.
Yeah,
it's always be topped up.
The logo always has to be visible through the whiskey. There you go.
Yeah.
Kathleen, you mega champion. Good to see you. I
can go on the nightstand for tonight.
I was going to tell a story about the first time that we caught up, but that can be for Roundtable Part 2.
Yeah. I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties tonight. But, and recent trip to Tassie as well, bought this spring away. Betty, no. And that's all that's left. My whiskey collection's shit because I drink it all.
That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it, honestly. That's so good.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for having me, and sorry about all the technical difficulties.
No, thank you so much. We've just received a badge that said, I've received 100 messages today from Restream Chat, which I don't ever recall. Either this is a new thing or this is a first. So I reckon it's a first. So you've broken a record on the amount of chat going on our chat. So
there's people still watching now. I don't know why, but you know what? Thank you everyone for tuning in. Kathleen, you're an absolute trailblazer. Like I said, thank you so much for being a part of Whisky Roundtable. We love having you on. We'd love to have you again. I think we definitely need a round 2 with you at some point in the future. So we'll catch up soon. And I know Scotty's probably trying to break back in, but Scotty, if you're watching, I'll tell you right now, when I used to host this and it fell apart once on me as host, you can't. So I'll tell you that now. Trying to jump back in as host doesn't work. Thank you very much. Kathleen, you're going to have to press the leave button and we'll do the same.
Okay.
I can't pull the stream. It is what it is.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, folks.
And thanks, Alex. Thanks, Andy. Thanks.
Cheers, Kath. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Scotty.
Love you guys. See you soon.
See ya. Thanks, everyone else.
Cheers.